So, I share the same concerns that a lot of people do, which is that the world is essentially backsliding into feudalism. And it's worth noting that as much as people, refer to the Dark Ages as, you know, this time of losing sort of enlightened knowledge, it's like, well, only sort of. The average person lost a lot of access to knowledge, and the scale of political organization changed drastically. But technology actually continued to advance. And I fear that's sort of what we're in for. Because, well, when something is useful, people seldom completely stop doing it. But people are not always short sighted, but frequently are. And this is one of those I would say this as a scientist, but I'm a scientist with a strong interest in engineering. I think that we should have an eye towards practical applications, and, there's something to be said for enhancing our understanding of the universe just because it's a wonderful, beautiful place to live. Especially when that knowledge can be used to help preserve aspects of it that we might be artificially disrupting with things like research into ecology and saving endangered species, and obviously things like climate change. But I'm worried that it's like, that meme where it's like, scientists' communication in the 60s, soon we will travel to the stars, versus science communication in the 2020s, for the last time, the Earth is not flat. you know, um, it's just unbelievably frustrating. Especially watching people like my father, who is an engineer and is not a bad guy by any means, but he has definitely fallen for the sort of wiles of people like Trump that are able to convince seemingly intelligent people to do extremely irrational and idiotic things, which is particularly ironic because my dad, if he were a little bit younger, totally would have been one of these, quote unquote rationalists, where he likes to pay lip service to the word rationality but has no comprehension of its meaning, which I'm actually not a philosophical rationalist, I'm a philosophical empiricist. But even so, I at least understand what deductive reasoning actually is, instead of just declaring everything I like to be rational and everything I don't like to be irrational, which is what people like my dad, as well as the sort of, Slate Star Kodak cult of Bay Area rationalists like to do. I don't know, man. It's like, it just feels like everybody acknowledges this problem that there's a smaller and smaller number of people with more and more power, and the primary reason for this is their massive acquisition of wealth. And I understand being dubious of handing more power to the state, because, well, then those powerful people can just control the state instead of controlling the companies. But, as it is, we're kind of getting the worst of both worlds, aren't we? And, admittedly, the nuts and bolts of policy is difficult, but people don't even look into what the policies are. They just declare that their opponents are evil and the other side must be, secretly trying to take over the world with socialism or whatever. Or, to be critical of my sort of allies on the left, they just, constantly claim, oh, it's the billionaires, and they're right about it being the billionaires, but then, when you ask them about, so why do you own stock in this and this company, they're always like, oh, well, I have to because blah, 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 cope, Or, and the more extreme elements, then they're always like, oh, totalitarian communism is a great idea because, blah, 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 cope. Which is particularly, again, like, it seems like there is a fairly broad base of support for relative moderate progressivism, where we want to bring back our sort of financial regulations and social safety nets and things, and, you know, rein in the unfettered growth of the wealthy, but without sort of providing undue power to the state. And, but it's just increasingly difficult to make traction on that, because not just the nature of discourse, but the nature of the sort of political alignments themselves, and it's all very complicated. God damn, though. I am sick and tired of just watching things get worse and worse and worse, even though technology continues to improve. And if we wanted to, and we could collectively get our crap together, we could make the world such a nice place to live in. And, like, on some level, there just is such a thing as good and evil. If we've allowed evil to thrive, and you always have to look into your own heart first, but you also do have to deal with things on an external level. And that's, I like various pieces of art and literature that are very much about how there's, and this is why I'm not a huge fantasy fan. I'm not even that huge of a Tolkien fan, but that is the aspect of Lord of the Rings that I've always liked, and I think a lot of people too, where it's like there's this interplay between the thing that the thing that's really in your control is your capacity to resist the temptation to evil, but then at the same time there is going to be this external threat of people that are either have succumbed to or are making no effort to resist that temptation. And I mean evil in the most general possible sense, where I'm not referring to any specific religious or even secular moral code, but to just this, it is this spiritual and woo-woo thing. And that's the thing, is it's very difficult to evaluate from without, but there's just this, thing everybody seems to understand, that it's based on, do you care more about yourself than you do about others, or do you care more about others than about yourself? That's kind of always what it's been. And obviously, none of us is perfect. We all care about ourselves to one degree or another. And yeah, blah, 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 Jesus, perfect example of selflessness, but, even if you don't believe in that, most people could agree that the ultimate moral standard is to be selfless and to care only for the well-being of others. But of course, the ultimate state of enlightenment is realizing that that is the ultimate transcendent happiness, too, is to care for others like that. I don't know. In my own heart, I have this long-running obsession with, not like punching people violence, but with, wanting to be a fighter pilot and all that. And I will say, during my lifetime, we've not had a significant problem with people being too aggressive towards, other great powers. We've had a problem with sort of picking on people who stand no chance. The only case where during my lifetime, there was a war that we really had to fight was against ISIS. The only time that we had a war that was justified, even if it was not strictly speaking necessary, was the going into Afghanistan to dismantle Al-Qaeda, which was justified, but it didn't work. And then, of course, we invaded Iraq, which is entirely unjustified. I don't know. I'm rambling, but that's the point of this channel. I've always had these weird thoughts about the military, where it's like, it's obviously wrong to kill people, but it's one of the few things where I still see people willing to make sacrifices for the sake of others, instead of just the relentless pursuit of their own wealth and power. And at the end of the day, the US military exists to do whatever the Democratic electorate wants it to do. But of course, people can be deceived by the likes of George Bush and Dick Cheney, who are well and truly war criminals, by the way. we stopped saying that for some reason. I'm no fan of Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is a regular criminal. But we got so worried about him that we kind of stopped criticizing the neoconservatives, which it's not that everybody on the Republican side is bad or everybody on the Democratic side is good, but we lost sight of a few things. And I'm no Tulsi Gabbard fan either, but she is right that we sort of started letting that go at a certain point, didn't we? Although she has now become a full-blown shill for Fox News, so nobody's, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's like, I often wonder, would I still be a fighter pilot if I got the chance? And it's like, depends. I probably would. But I'd like to think that if I ever got assigned a mission to drop air-to-ground ordnance on civilians, I would just refuse, and if they throw me in the stockade, they throw me in the stockade. I'll go and defend our ground troops against air attack, and if it really comes to it, I'll, do close air support against enemy ground formations, but not going to drop bombs on a city. But I don't know, maybe I shouldn't even be willing to do all that. Who knows? I will say that feudalism depends on having a sort of warrior caste, but now that we have automation, it's not clear that that would look like it did in the past. In fact, you basically need a cast of software engineers that have no resistance to violence.